poll on the Republican presidential candidates, we go to Washington, D.C. to talk to Sarah Posner, who spent the weekend covering the poll in Iowa, senior editor of Religion Dispatches, contributor to The Nation magazine, author of God's Prophets, Faith, Fraud, and the Republican Crusade for Values Voters. Sarah Posner, first talk about the significance of the straw poll.
Well, the straw poll in and of itself is neither a predictor of who's going to win the nomination or an indicator of nationwide which candidate is the front runner. But it does give the winner of the straw poll momentum because it demonstrates to the base that these voters in the heartland in Iowa picked this person as the winner of this unofficial event that, like I said, doesn't have any meaning in terms of winning the nomination ultimately.
Now, while more people voted in this straw poll than they did in the last Republican presidential straw poll 4 years ago, I think it was something like 16,000 something versus 14,000. It's way down from George Bush when he first ran for president, when there's something like 23,000 people voted.
Right. I don't know what the explanation for that is. I do know that around that time in 2000 or in 1999, there was a lot of energy around Bush. There was sort of a coalescing of the base around Bush. Right now, there's not a coalescing of the base around a single candidate, especially with Perry jumping into the race now. So that might explain the lower turnout, that people are basically undecided, and so we're not enthused enough about a single candidate to go and vote. But I will say, having been there on Saturday and for several days before Saturday, there was a lot of energy around Bachmann and Paul and the people who were out to vote for them, and even the people who were out to vote for Rick Santorum, who came in fourth. The people were very, very enthused and very motivated.
Start off by talking about Michele Bachmann, what this means for her. She was born in Iowa. She was born in Waterloo. What does this straw poll mean? And, of course, a fellow Minnesotan, Tim Pawlenty, who she has now edged out, the Congress member edging out the governor.
Well, Bachmann, I think, was not seen as a serious candidate before, and this propels her into the front-runner status. She's up there with Romney and Perry, and she, I think, before was seen as a long shot. Her campaign was seen as somewhat quixotic, and now she's seen by the base and by the press as a serious candidate.
I wanted to turn to the debate that took place, the Republican debate on Thursday night. It was the portion where they talked about taxes. This is the debate moderator, Bret Baier of Fox News.
I'm going to ask a question to everyone here on the stage. Say you had a deal, a real spending cuts deal, 10-to-1, as Byron said, spending cuts to tax increases. Speaker, you're already shaking your head. But who on this stage would walk away from that deal? When you raise your hand, if you feel so strongly about not raising taxes, you'd walk away on the 10-to-1 deal. Just making sure everyone at home and everyone here knows that they all raise their hands. They're all saying that they feel so strongly about not raising taxes that a 10-to-1 deal they would walk away from. Confirming that.
That was Bret Baier of Fox News. All 8 Republican candidates raised their hands. Sarah Posner, the significance of this, and talk overall about Michele Bachmann's economic position.
Well, the clip you played from the debate just demonstrates the extremes to which the all 8 presidential, or now 7 presidential candidates are going to appease the base, which has really been primed by the Tea Party and by the religious right to have this antipathy towards paying taxes to a government that they portray as this greedy monster that's stealing their money. I mean, with this weekend in Iowa, the number of times that I heard candidates refer to the government and taxes in terms of it being a money-eating machine, that's a term that Bachmann used, or theft. You know, the idea that the government is this big behemoth that takes your money for no reason but to oppress you. is really the heart of what the Republican economic message is right now. And that's why all the candidates felt compelled to say that even that amount of spending cuts versus tax increases would not be adequate for them. They want all cuts and no taxes. So Michele Bachmann's economic message is very much focused on this same thing, that government is something that, the federal government is something that oppresses you, that it takes your money. She, like I said, she called it, on the stump, she called it a money-eating machine. And she pledged, the things that she pledged to do were repeal Obamacare. She said, I will not rest. This is her in her stump speech. I will not rest until Obamacare is repealed. She wants to repeal the Dodd-Frank Wall Street reform bill. She wants to basically get rid of all EPA regulations. So any federal regulations that protect consumers from environmental harm or from predatory lenders, things like that, she's opposed to that. So that's why she wants to cut taxes. That's why she wants to eliminate the government and eliminate regulations. And this is not just a Tea Party message, and she is not just a Tea Party candidate. This is a message that resonates with the religious right because they believe that the government, that God grants three different spheres of society, different types of authority. And they think that that God granted the government very limited authority. And if the government, in their mind, exceeds that through promulgating regulations, then they consider that tyranny and enslavement. And so this is why her message resonates both with fiscal conservatives who are very anti-tax, anti-government, sort of what traditionally what people think of as Tea Party types, but also with the religious right. And this is the coalition that came together to give her this victory in Iowa.
Sarah Posner, though she says she's for a smaller government, in fact, talk about her history. She went to Oral Roberts University and then went on to work at the IRS and benefited tremendously, she and her husband, from Medicare, from Medicaid, from tax subsidies. Talk about this history.
Well, Bachmann went to the law school at Oral Roberts University, which later, after she graduated, got absorbed into Regent University, the university founded by Pat Robertson in Virginia Beach. But I did a story last month about Oral Roberts and the type of legal education that she got there, and it was very much along the lines of what I just described before, with this view of constitutional law that God grants certain authority to government, the church, and the family, and that your rights are granted by God, and if the government infringes on those rights by exceeding the authority that it was granted by God, then that's tyranny. The whole aim of founding Oral Roberts University was to, in the mind of the founders, reinstitute biblical law over man's law in jurisprudence and in politics, and to train lawyers and future leaders just like Michele Bachmann to rise to the level of leadership that she has risen to. So, as you point out, the irony in all of this is that she went on to become a tax lawyer and worked for the IRS, the very agency that Tea Partiers and many people in the religious right see as this oppressive beast, and that even though she wants to cut federal spending and cut the social safety net, she and her husband, in their Christian counseling business that she often touts on the campaign trail, as being she's a small business owner and she's a job creator, that they benefited from Medicare reimbursements.
I wanted to turn to the man who's now just entered the race, the Texas Governor Perry. This was Perry on Fox News before he entered the presidential race Saturday, where he describes himself as a prophet. His comment came in response to a question from the Fox host, Neil Cavuto.
Reading the press within your fine state and then outside, you have kind of like the Chris Christie phenomenon. Very popular outside your state. Still popular, but not nearly as popular within your state. And there are even Tea Party groups within your state who like you but don't love you, who say that when it comes to things like not spending a rainy day fund, an idea you came up with,
right.
You say one thing and do another. What do you say?
I say that a prophet is generally not loved in their hometown. That's both biblical and practical.
That was Governor Rick Perry. Sarah Posner, quick comments on Governor Perry.
Well, this is very reflective of his reaching out to a certain element of the religious right. The people that he worked with to do his prayer rally in Houston last Saturday, the very week before the straw poll in Iowa and the week before he announced in South Carolina. And these people consider themselves to be modern-day apostles and prophets who are out to engage in spiritual warfare with the forces of Satan. And so when he is describing himself as a prophet, he's dog-whistling that base by saying that, you know, hey, look, I do these things because God is telling me to. And if maybe you don't like some of them, well, you know, if you look at the Bible, not all the prophets were completely popular in their time either, but they turned out to be prophetic.
Where do you see the whole issue of religion, smaller government, social conservatism going now? I mean, Iowa is not necessarily representative of the whole country. And where Ron Paul, who also had a strong showing, granted, in a small poll, he did come in number 2, only, what was it, 200 votes behind Congressmember Bachmann, and Ron Paul, this very strong anti-war message, a libertarian.
Well, he's not exactly a libertarian. I think his anti-war message resonates with people who aren't conservative, who are against the war. But he also has the very strong message against the power of the federal government that I was describing before that Michele Bachmann has, viewing it as a tyrant that's coming to take your gun away, or to, in his words, at the straw poll, in his last speech before the voting ended, he talked about armed IRS agents coming to take the money of pro-life people to pay for other people's abortions. So he is not beyond trying to reach out to the religious right part of the base. In fact, he's hired the same evangelical outreach advisor that was used by both Presidents Bush. So he's clearly trying to connect with that part of the base, even though many of the, say, the homeschoolers, Bachmann has a lot of support from homeschoolers, but her support from homeschoolers is generally from Christian homeschoolers. There are other homeschoolers that call themselves liberty-minded, that are less focused on the religious aspect of it, that are very much behind Paul. But he's not reaching the very same part of the religious right base that Bachmann is, but he is using some of the same rhetoric to attract those same voters, and he's very anti-abortion, just like she is. He's anti-gay marriage, just like she is. But all 3 of the front-runner candidates, Romney, Bachmann, and Perry, to varying degrees, are going to use religion and social issues in the race. They're going to use this small government message. I think that Bachmann is much more than the rest of them going to use the language, the sort of rhetoric and ideology that she learned at Oral Roberts to meld the fiscal conservatism, small government message with her religious message.
Finally, Romney, who has been talked about as a frontrunner, did not pay much attention to the straw poll, did not put a lot of work into Iowa right now. But what does the fact that he was so far behind mean?
Well, he can always say that he wasn't really competing in Iowa, and that's why he didn't make a good showing there, and he's been focused on New Hampshire and South Carolina. But I think that he, as much as he tried, I saw him speak at the state fair last week, where he infamously now said that corporations are people. And he's trying very hard to reach the base with his, small government message, his pro-corporate message. But I don't think that he is speaking the radical anti-government message that the base seems to want to hear, and that Perry and Bachmann seem more attuned to speaking.
We're going to leave it there. Sarah Posner, senior editor of Religion Dispatches, author of God's Prophets, Faith Fraud, and the Republican Crusade for Values Voters. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. When we